Well, hello, folks and folkesses. It's another beautiful day here on the Kojomain YouTube channel, and today we're appreciating nature. Everything that grows, the lush greenery of the natural world, and also the satisfaction of absolutely dominating opponents with huge characters that never leave, as well as lots of free stuff straight from the bountiful mouth of nature's ever-flowing cornucopia. That's right, I am showcasing my build of Rin and Orchid today, which is built around the forest terrain. This was an archetype that didn't really work out in the first set, but it's gotten a lot of very cool support in Trial by Frost, so now it's great fun to play. If you look at the competitive tournament performance of Rin, you'll find that she's actually played a decent amount, but only ever in one flavor, the Lyra Festival combo, which is an archetype where you build your entire deck around trying to make Lyra Festival's alternate winning condition work. Now, Lyra Festival is strong, no doubt, but I still think it's kind of sad because this archetype doesn't make much use of Rin's unique ability, except for the fact that drawing those additional cards is kind of helpful when you're looking for combo pieces. So for this deck I'm playing today, we're not going all in on the festival plan. Instead, we'll try to make the best use of Rin's ability to get additional value and win the game in the normal way by progressing expeditions. Also, as a side note, as it happens, the infamous Elio published his own video about Rin just recently on his channel, which I'll link in the description. He's playing yet another flavor of Rin, which is built around Ebenezer Scrooge. It's very interesting, so check it out if you have an opportunity, but apart from some Muna staples, his list is actually completely different from what I'm playing here, which just goes to show that there's a lot more to do with Rin than just Lyra Festival. Anyway, if you want to play Rin successfully, there are a couple of very important things you need to pay attention to. First of all, Rin's ability reads, when one of your expeditions moves forward due to forest, draw a card, then put a card from your hand in reserve. In simplified terms, this roughly means that whenever you progress, around 70% of the time, you'll get a resupply. So it's much weaker than, say, Fen, who kind of does something very similar, but there is the additional upside that we can freely choose which cards to put from hand to reserve. Now, I'd like to point out two problems you might run into if you play Rin this way. First, as I said, you only get this additional card around 70% of the time, since not every step on the expedition track even includes forest. Luckily, there are a couple of new cards from the second set that solve this problem, most importantly Persephone, who's a new staple for Rin because she adds forest as a valid terrain no matter what region she's in. And secondly, there is a sequencing problem you might not see coming, but you'll feel the effects of it immediately if you play carelessly as Rin. Let's say it's the second round, you've just used your first round to bring Icebound Teija into play, and now you've played two characters from your hand for round 2. And you end up winning one of these sides. What will happen? At the end of the round, you'll progress, Rin's ability will trigger, you'll draw a card, and you'll drop one card from your hand to reserve, and then both of your characters will go to the reserve as well. So then you immediately have to discard something from your overloaded reserve. And if there are any cards left from the previous round, it's going to be even worse. So because Rin gets her quasi-resupply at the end of the round, instead of the beginning of the round like Fen, you very easily overload your reserve. You can somewhat mitigate this problem by trying to play out of your reserve as much as possible, but in order to really solve this, you need to build your deck specifically with this weakness in mind. What I mean by that is, you want to be running as many cards as possible that are either very cheap from reserve or, even better, have support abilities you can activate for free. Very similar to how a Fen player would build their deck too. You'll see example of this in just a second when I go over the deck list. I just wanted to mention this beforehand explicitly because it's really important when playing Rin to pay attention to this. So let me walk you through the deck list step by step. First up, our characters. For the low end, we have Muna Caregiver at common. It's a Muna staple, very cheap, it passes the turn, and it has that super powerful support ability that anchors, which is exactly what we want. Jack Frost is a new card, and honestly, I'm not completely sold on it, because it only activates from hand, which is not ideal for us in this deck, but very clever people have been saying good things about this card, so I'm running it here, and I have to admit, it looks very solid on paper. Persephone, as I mentioned in the intro, is a new staple for Rin. I love the 3 in Forest. This card has been very good and definitely belongs in this deck. Now, Kodama and Mowgli are two cards that are normally played at common rarity, but I've upgraded them to rare here because they get very cool support abilities. And as I said, that's very important for Rin. You want to run as many cards as possible that have these support abilities so you can activate them for free at the end of the round to both make the most out of your additional reserve cards and also to avoid overflowing your reserve, as we just discussed. The last 2 mana character slot goes to Coppelia, who is another Rin staple, and for a very good reason. When Rin's ability triggers at the end of the round, you get to draw 1 and drop 1. So you can simply drop Coppelia from your hand, which will activate her, but since it's the end of the round, she'll lose that as sleep right away, and it's just a free Coppelia for the upcoming round. Truth be told, I was not initially sold on this, because I was worried you might be burning through card advantage too quickly if you do this. Keep in mind that Coppelia enters from reserve, so she's fleeting, kind of like a Bravos Tracer in that way. You only get to use her once instead of twice. But having played the deck with and without Coppelia, I can definitely say that she is very strong. This trick of dropping Coppelia for Rin's ability is kind of Rin's signature move, and for good reason. You definitely have enough resources to be able to afford it, and then Coppelia is simply a 3/3/0 for completely free. Definitely an include. On 3 mana, we have Aloe Vera, of course. This girl is the undisputed queen of Muna, very flexible because you can cast her for 3 and for 4 mana, giving you additional card advantage with resupply, which is especially potent, of course, in this deck because we've optimized so much toward our cards being good from reserve. Overall, it's a bonkers card, and it's followed closely by the previous queen of Muna, Daughter of Yggdrasil. Weirdly enough, this lady has seen a bit of a decline in popularity. Trickster recently argued in a video that she is one of the primary disappointments in the Muna color, which I think is kind of crazy to say. Her ability is no downside at all, and her stat line is extremely strong. So as long as I'm in charge of deck building on this channel, Daughter of Yggdrasil will continue to be played in Muna decks. We also have Muna Druid. This is one of the common fillers, so to say, but I'm definitely happy with it. It's a strong play for round 1, and it brings a powerful support ability to the table at common, exactly what we're looking for in Rin. In general, these support abilities that anchor from reserve are incredibly good to use on our Aloe Vera to get the additional resupply, and on our Daughter of Yggdrasil to keep her massive stat line in play longer. Another reason to not drop that card. Now, before we go on to spells, let me quickly talk about cards that are notably absent here in the characters division. Demeter is a new very flashy Muna card from Trial by Frost, and it synergizes perfectly with our Forest game plan. Nonetheless, after playing with it a bit, I decided to cut it from the deck. I know it's a flavor fail, so if you insist, you can definitely play her, but at the end of the day, she's still 7 mana, which is incredibly expensive, even for a threat that sticks around multiple turns. The second card I ended up cutting is Hydrakana for the same reason. Now, you might say, but the Kojo main, Demeter is not only a deity, she's also a plant. Which means you can run Bountiful Meadow to ramp into both Hydrakana and Demeter, and it's a wombo combo. Yes, I tried that. It's definitely a route you can go if you want to aim for a more sort of big late game style. But in the version of the deck that I'm playing later in this video, I cut both of these huge cards together with Bountiful Meadow, and it's definitely not a downgrade. 7 mana is a lot of mana, guys. Like, game-losingly much mana. For spells, I'm only running 1, Mana Reaping. I've really grown to love this removal spell. I suspect its strength drops off a bit the higher you go on the competitive ladder, because against better decks, you would expect that they have more resources, so giving them additional mana to work with is more of a problem for you. But in my experience, it's normally fine. And in turn, you get an unconditional removal spell for it, which is very hard to beat. One thing I do have to mention here, we are not running any Beauty Sleeps in this deck. That's a card you might be confused not to see here because it's basically a Muna staple, and I completely agree with that. It's just that with the 3 mana cost from reserve, I'm worried that we'll resupply this and then we'll never be able to afford it from reserve. So I've elected to omit it here for the reason of it being so expensive from reserve. But the list, as I'm presenting it here, doesn't include any uniques by default, and as a result, there are 2 slots for common cards still unfilled. So if you want, you can use those to play 2 copies of Beauty Sleep. That's definitely not a bad idea. For permanents, we are playing the new gear permanent, Floral Tent, which is an absolute house, let me tell you. The primary effect is that anchored characters in this expedition are protected from removal, which is nice, but it rarely even matters, and honestly, even though it's useful for our archetype specifically, I would play this card even if that text wasn't even on there in the first place. Because it also resupplies for 1 mana, which is absurd. This card is crazy, folks. It passes the turn, it gives you time, and it gives you lots of resources. And on top of it all, it also sometimes protects your big guys. I am in love. Everybody's playing this, and yeah, they're right. This is like the best new card of Muna out of Trial by Frost, so definitely play this. But we also have Icebound Teija, one of the new Icebound landmarks, and definitely the strongest one of them, I would say. Well, one of the strongest ones. After you've played 3 characters into regions that include forest, which is, as you can imagine, that's very easy for us. It kind of automatically happens over the course of the early game. This flips into a 5/5/5 dragon that also anchors itself. That is 10/10/10 worth of stats for 3 mana, which is more than enough to warrant the tempo loss that you'll have when you play this. And to make matters even worse, for anyone unlucky enough to find themselves on the opposing side of the board when this flips, the Dragon Shade also has hand cost 0 because it's a token. So you can anchor it again and again easily using the support ability anchoring effects that are printed on literally every other card in our deck. And yes, the pay 3 mana and do nothing that turn definitely hurts when you play it, but trust me, this is worth the trouble. Now, as the deck list stands at this point, there are a couple of slots left available at the end of the list, so that's where you can play whatever you like. I recommended the Beauty Sleep earlier. You can also try the new Magic Beans, which can offer additional help turning your regions into forest. Or if you have any cool uniques, those would also go in this slot. As for myself, talking about uniques, in the version that you see me play on BGA in just a second, I run 3 uniques, which I want to just briefly talk about for completeness sake. As you guys know, I normally have always been building my decks without uniques to make it easier for you guys to try them out, but just last week during the 2-Mole Championship, I pulled this adorable Repotter Otter, which has an absolutely bonkers amount of text, and every bit of it is relevant. For 3 mana, he's a 2/2/2 that has the normal Repotter Otter ability, allowing both players to drop something to reserve, to draw. Keep in mind that this is very useful for us, since not only can we cheat in Coppelia this way, we can also simply put one of our great support cards to reserve and everything's great. Additionally, when this guy enters play and he's in forest, we also get boosts on 2 characters. That is very, very strong, especially in this deck. And finally, if at the end of the round you progress with him due to forest and you control 3 or more characters, he even anchors something, which is just a cherry on top, but it's a massive cherry on top. I could not believe my eyes when I pulled this, folks. It's every Rin player's dream, and honestly, the main reason I've built this deck. I had Rin forests on my list for a long time, but when I saw this, I knew it would be the next video I make. So yeah, I'm over the moon about this guy. We also have a very cool Lyra Cloth Dancer who doesn't just give fleeting to one character, it gives fleeting to all of our opponent's characters. And it toughens up our board with Tough 1 on top of that. Another really exciting unique to be able to finally run, I think. I suspect my buddy Elio, my sworn rival Elio, would really like this one, as I know he's been playing a version of Muna centered around Cloth Dancer and handing out fleeting to opponents and stuff like that. Our third unique is Mowgli. This one is nothing spectacular really, like so many Mowgli uniques are. Simply a 2-mana character that you can also flexibly play for 3 mana. And he has a high stat in Forest, so it's good enough. Now, note that this frees up 1 rare slot in the deck, because I have to cut one of the 3 rare copies of Mowgli to run this. So, after a lot of consideration, I've decided to replace that rare slot with a single copy of Lyra Festival, adding that back into the deck. As I said, it's a staple for Rin, but not in the archetype we're playing. Nonetheless, it turns out we're incidentally running a lot of the pieces that make winning with Festival feasible, like Kodama and Coppelia, who can both enter asleep, and we have lots of anchoring effects as well. So this one-off festival is probably a very good, cheeky little surprise plan. And in fact, in one of the games you're about to see, it actually ended up being relevant. So if you like Festival, you can definitely play it in this archetype as well. Either just one copy like I do here, or even multiple copies. So you can see the whole deck list here in the lovely, familiar, completely unreadable and terrible format of the official website. I'll also add a link to AlterDB in the video description as usual. You can view the deck there, and they also have a button that lets you export the deck as a list of serial card numbers, which is, the common format for Alter deck lists. You can paste that anywhere you like. And with all of that being said, let's waste no more time and finally get into these games. Have fun. So here we are for game 1, and our opponent is Sigismar. We're jumping right in with one of the most common and the toughest opponents. Our opening hand has a very nice split of differently costed cards. There's really all sorts of ways you could go with this, but since it's round 1, the Jack Frost is kind of useless. I also definitely want to play Aloe Vera for 4 mana in round 2, so I settled for Muna Druid in round 1, and keeping the Mana Reaping in hand as well. It's a pretty standard opening for Muna. Our opponent leads with Monolith Scribe, getting Jeanne d'Arc as their resupply. It's very interesting. I gather that it's not a commonly played card in Sigismar, but I assume they're putting some additional focus on maybe Monolith, or perhaps they have uniques that boost tokens, so they're looking to get these additional 1/1/1 recruits. Playing the Muna Druid is technically safer on the left side, since there is still 1 mana open on the opponent's side, so putting it against the 1/2/2 Scribe is risky. And we're immediately punished as they add a Foundry mechanic, but granted, this would have been the exact same on the left side as well. Foundry mechanic plus the recruit adds up to 2/2/3 in power, which trades with our druid just the same. So in either case, we're lucky to not have been completely countered, and the round ends 2-for-1 in their favor. A strong start for Sigismar as usual, but they will have to discard from reserve for it. Before that though, we get to trigger our Rin, drawing Daughter of Yggdrasil, which I put in reserve immediately. Our opponent decides to get rid of the Rune Scribe from reserve, and we go into round 2, where we see Floral Tent and another Aloe Vera. Now this is an interesting position. My original plan was to just play Aloe Vera for 4, but with all of these new cards, we have a lot of alternative options, like leading with Floral Tent and then Daughter of Yggdrasil in a kind of zigzag fashion, and then anchoring it with Muna Druid. That sounds quite strong. In any case, I benched the second Aloe here. The thing is, Aloe Vera is weak on the right side since we're only in Mountain there. And on the left side, if she's our only play, it's very easy for our opponent to progress with just 3 power in Mountain. So then they would get another double progression compared to our single one, and then we would be very far behind. So putting down the Daughter seems better here, which means that I lead with Floral Tent to play slow, and the resupply gives us Jack Frost again. That is very unlucky. As I mentioned in the deck tour, we're optimizing our deck to be good from reserve, and this is one of the very few cards we have that don't have a support ability, and they only trigger from hand. Now, the round plays out exactly as expected. Here I was worried their last card could be Teamwork Training, which would remove our Daughter and give them a 2-for-0 progression, but they just pass, so we trade 1-for-1 with our Daughter staying in play. And this triggers Rin again with the progression in Forest, so we draw another Floral Tent. Now, note that unfortunately, we've gotten into the situation I mentioned where we need to drop something from reserve, and although the Daughter is anchored, the Floral Tent from the Hero Expedition will go to reserve, so we'll have to discard from reserve. I get rid of the Jack Frost naturally, and our opponent has to discard as well, dropping the Ordis Cadets. It looks like they'll maybe just play Jeanne d'Arc next round. That would be very comfortable for us. Our draws are Icebound Taiga and Mowgli, who comes in at an unfortunate time since we don't need any forest power right now. So that character doesn't help us at all in this situation on either side. He will be pretty good later on though, so I opted for benching the Floral Tent instead, since we have a second one in reserve already. As it turns out, our opponent actually does what I hoped and just puts down Jeanne d'Arc. And at first glance, this looks like a round where you'll definitely be able to double progress as Rin here, but our Mowgli is useless this round, and the Aloe Vera doesn't cut it either, So we have two options basically. Get the Icebound Taiga into play and do nothing else, settling for a 1-for-1 trade, or gamble with the Floral Tent to see what the resupply is and hope that we can somehow contest the Jeanne d'Arc after all. And Floral Tent is luckily just 1 mana, so we can actually do both. Play the tent first, and if the resupply is a miss, go for the Taiga instead. That's what I end up doing, and crazily enough, our resupply is Persephone. Now on first glance that looks incredibly unlucky. Our one other character that also only has forest power, but keep in mind that Persephone's ability makes the region forest in addition to its other terrains, so playing her to the right here would actually progress. It would be an even trade with the Jeanne d'Arc. So we have 3 options now. We can let both players progress by playing Persephone, we can let neither player progress by playing Aloe Vera, or we can concede 1 progression to get Taiga into play. Actually, in the game, I ended up going with the Aloe Vera, but looking back on it, I think you could make a case as well for going with the Icebound Taiga. Since we don't progress on the right this round, the Aloe Vera will be just as weak in the next round as it is now, even if we get a resupply, which is nice. But in general, the Icebound Taiga can be very difficult to get into play since it costs 3. So it would definitely have paid off to take that opportunity here, even if that means we concede another progression to our Sigismar opponent. But as it stands in the game, it's a 1-for-0 progression, so the game is again even going into the 4th round. Our draws are Mana Reaping and Coppelia. With the hero side now being in Forest again, and also the Persephone in reserve, it looks very likely we'll be able to progress due to Forest this round. Which means we should keep this Coppelia in hand to use with Rin's ability at the end of the round. So I benched the second Mana Reaping. 1 is definitely enough against a hero like Sigismar, I'd say. They don't run very many big targets that you really want to remove. At noon, we get a resupply from Aloe Vera, which is a second Icebound Taiga. Now, this is one situation where the rare upgrade for Icebound Taiga would actually have been pretty strong. It reduces the reserve mana cost to 2. And I had been considering it for the deck when I was building it, but I ended up not going for it. But with Aloe Vera and Floral Tent resupplying, and with Rin allowing you to transfer cards from hand to reserve pretty easily, there is a strong argument for this rare upgrade. Even if it looks very unimpactful on paper, it makes a big difference because, as I said, what is holding Taiga back really is the chunky mana cost. So being able to push that down to 2 mana is definitely very interesting. As things stand though, in this situation, I decided to still go for playing it even though it's 3 mana. My plan was to play Persephone to the right side, going up to 5 in Forest and progressing to get out of this bothersome only mountain region, while keeping the only forest region on the left available to play in later on. Our opponent here activates Foundry Mechanic from reserve to bring an Ordis Carrier into play for just 2 mana. Moderately concerning, of course, since they have 3 mana and 3 cards in hand left. But I go through with my Persephone plans still. I'm pretty confident that the 5 in Forest will be enough to progress, but our opponent apparently is still looking to contest that side. First with a Ratatosker for 1, and after I pass, they also add an Ordis Cadets, which is unfortunately exactly enough to tie us and prevent our progression there. It definitely sucks. Our plan to activate Rin fails, and with this our Sigismar opponent again pulls ahead as we head into round 5. Not very good. We're seeing Jack Frost and our unique Cloth Dancer here. Again, this is the version that gives fleeting to all of our opponent's characters. But in this situation, that doesn't look too hot. Sigismar's tokens don't care about fleeting in the first place, and the 2 characters from reserve will have it anyway. So I could see benching it for mana here. In the game, I wasn't sure if it might not come in handy later as a body with 4 water power, since keep in mind that the expedition card in the center will have the only water region on it. So I opted to bench the second Taiga instead. One really convenient thing for us is that our opponent has opted not to put anything into the mana for 2 rounds now. So them playing their Monolith out here finally means they do nothing else this round. Also, we have the Mana Reaping already face up in our reserve, so I'm not concerned about this at all. I play Mowgli to win the left side, which also puts the second counter on our Icebound Taiga. So we need to be careful here not to accidentally end up flipping this prematurely. Next, I use the Mana Reaping as expected, and now it's a bit unfortunate because this Jack Frost from hand is not enough to win the right side, since it has only 1 power in Mountain. We do have an alternative though. The rare Heartcast Coppelia for 2 mana, which has 3 in Mountain. But that's not ideal either, since in that case, our opponent would also progress with their 1 in water. So it's an awkward choice between both players progressing or neither progressing. And since our opponent is 1 step ahead, I assumed it would be better to have neither player progress. So I went with the Jack Frost here to tie that side and score only 1 progression from the hero side this round. Also, this way we keep the Coppelia in our hand for Rin's ability, because naturally at the end of the round we trigger Rin, and our draw is the fabulous Repotter Otter, the star player of this deck that I'm delighted to see here, of course, and we can immediately do the Coppelia thing. Drop her to reserve, which triggers her and brings her into play for free in preparation for the upcoming round. Now, we do have to discard a Jack Frost from reserve here once again, but no matter. We're heading into the next round with a very good position, even drawing another Mana Reaping as a contingency plan, together with a second Coppelia. I finally benched the Lyra Cloth Dancer here because the rest of our hand is just so much better at this point. Now again, in order to make the most out of this Repotter Otter unique, we need to play him in forest, we need to have the Coppelia still in hand, and we also need to make sure that we have 3 characters at the end of the round. That is unfortunately pretty unlikely to happen here, since again, neither of our expeditions is in forest, which also means that we don't get to flip the Icebound Taiga this round. It's all a bit awkward, and as things stand, the best plan for us is probably to try and secure 1 progression this round and hope for a sweep next round to close out the game. So I play the Aloe Vera first, since it has 4 in water, opting not to pay the additional 1 to anchor her. Keep in mind that we can always anchor her for free with the Mowgli in reserve should we want to. Our opponent brings out the reserve Ratatoskr, which puts 3 bodies into the hero expedition to make it 4/4/4, tying up that side for us while they threaten to progress with Mountain. I go for another hardcast Coppelia for the opposing side, which pushes us up to 6 Mountain there. That's looking very likely to progress, but keep in mind that a teamwork training could still come out of our opponent at any point. In fact, they do end up playing something like that, the rare Break the Ice, which here is discounted to 2 mana for them, so it's kind of an upgraded teamwork training really, sending one of our Coppelias to reserve exhausted. Now this is a curious position. Our opponent is threatening a double progression, but I'm pretty confident that if we manage to progress 1 step here, I'll be able to close out the game in the following round with the power spike we'll have coming from Repotter Otter and the Taiga flipping. So I really want to push through 1 progression. And in the end I opted to use Mana Reaping on the single 1/1/1 recruit in our opponent's companion expedition. Definitely not the kind of target I was hoping for with Mana Reaping, but hey, it kind of has a very good chance to do the trick here. Their Ordis recruits from reserve won't be able to contest us on that side now, and with this move we're threatening to progress while at the same time stopping one of their progressions. So I think it's reasonable. Also keep in mind that since the thing we removed was a token, our opponent doesn't even get the additional mana for it, as would be the case normally with Mana Reaping. That's another really cool upside with this removal spell that makes it especially good against the Dragon Shade tokens from the Icebound landmarks, or, as you can see, against random 1/1/1s. So as expected, our opponent places the Ordis Cadets on the right, going back up to 1 water to snatch that progression after all, and as my last action this round, I use Mowgli from reserve to anchor our Aloe Vera, which means we have succeeded in our mission to secure 1 progression at any cost, going into a match point for our Sigismar opponent, but we have a plan. The draws for this final round are, curiously, 2 copies of Muna Caregiver. Now, I won't lie, that is kind of a downer. I struggle to imagine any combination of weaker draws for this situation, since none of the expeditions even use Mountain. So these are literally 0/0/0 characters for us, both of them. But at least these are 2 1-drops, which allow us to really slow play this round. We absolutely need to win both sides though. Our Aloe Vera resupply is an Icebound Taiga. That is also completely useless. I get the feeling we've been very unlucky with draws in this game, but we're not out yet. Our opponent starts out with an Ordis Gatekeeper, going to 2s in all relevant terrains on both sides. Luckily, our Aloe Vera from before is doing big work on the left with her 4 in water. I play out one of the Caregivers. As I said, this really does next to nothing. I'm just trying to pass the turn back to our opponent, really. Note that it's very important to play the Caregiver to the left here instead of the right, because on the right it would trigger our Icebound Taiga to flip prematurely. which we want to avoid until the very last possible moment. Our opponent's second to last card is a Thoth. That's now 5/5/4 for them on the right side. I slow play once again with our second caregiver. These caregivers are absolutely useless, but somehow them being 1 mana is giving us a lot of wiggle room here. Our opponent is forced to reveal their last play before us, and it's not a bad one. It's Charge, to put boosts on their entire board. With that, they tie us on the left while going up to 8/8/7 on the right. But oh, opponent, I've got bad news for you. We're not nearly out of gas. Play out the Coppelia. This triggers Icebound Taiga to flip, which on its own pushes our right side up to 8/8/5, enough to tie the board. And then finally, as a flourish, at the end we can bring out our star of the show, the spectacular Repotter Order, to win both sides with the boost just as planned. And that's the game. A comeback against Sigismar, very nice, love to see it. GG. For game 2, we are up against a Teija opponent, so this is a bit of a Muna mirror. And we're seeing our Otter in the opening hand, together with not 1 but 2 Aloe Veras, not to mention a Coppelia and all sorts of other good stuff. Difficult to say what's good to keep here. Again, the Jack Frost is not too inspiring in round 1. I'd say it's reasonable to commit to just playing the Icebound Taiga in round 1 here, but in the game I opted to bench that in order to keep our unique, the Aloe Vera and a Coppelia. The idea being that our Teija opponent's first play is likely to be 1 big 2 mana or 3 mana character, and then I'll just go ahead and play either the Aloe or the Otter to the other expedition, trade progressions 1 for 1, and then trigger Rin, and for that I want the Coppelia ready, of course. In the game, that's exactly what happened. We see a Daughter of Yggdrasil being played, and the mutual draw gives us our own Daughter of Yggdrasil. So that's obviously a more attractive play than the Aloe for 3 mana. We trade progressions as planned with these 2 daughters on the board, and I'm able to trigger in. The draw is a Persephone, another card that I really enjoy seeing with us moving into this annoying only mountain terrain now on the left side. One unusual thing about this game you'll notice is that because it's a Muna mirror and we both played Daughters of Yggdrasil on round 1, both players are now absolutely drowning in cards. We both have 6 cards in our hand at the start of the second round. That is so many cards. So this game will be much more about using your resources to the max rather than getting additional cards. I benched the Mowgli here, which feels a bit sad since it's one of the rares and I just really like the card. Honestly, with all of these additional draws, I could see an argument for benching the Aloe Vera even. We don't really need these resupplies. In the game though, I wasn't feeling so adventurous, so I just played out the Aloe Vera 4/4, as is Muna tradition basically. And it seems reasonable in this spot because her 4 in water makes it very hard for our opponent to contest, since they're in an only water terrain on the right here. They could tie us with the Daughter, of course, but for them it's obviously more reasonable to play that to the left here, where they can advance. So it's another even trade that lets us trigger Rin. Persephone number 2 is our draw, and I drop the second Coppelia. All in all, I'm really liking our position in this game so far, but I have to say that this wealth of cards in both players' hands kind of worries me. I would much rather both players were starved for cards, and then we could make more effective use of Rin's ability and the Aloe Vera resupply. For round 3, we're again up to 6 cards, with our unique Cloth Dancer being one of them, and that's a card I was generally hoping to see against Muna, but again, in the current situation, trying to play a resource game isn't very attractive. Our Aloe Vera resupply is a Floral Tent. I really like to see that. I'm thinking maybe Floral Tent plus Kodama and then Persephone in this round? Or maybe Tent and then Caregiver followed by the Daughter of Yggdrasil. Now, to make matters even wilder, our opponent puts down another Daughter, handing out yet another free card and threatening the Hero Expedition. Fortunately, I can counter pretty comfortably with our own Daughter from reserve. That's a play we could have delayed, but with how many options both players have here, I was feeling a bit lost, honestly. So I was looking to simplify the game, really. Our opponent's next play is an Inari. Are you serious? That's yet another each player draws a card. What's going on? 7 cards in hand now for us with this draw of our unique Mowgli. And the weirdest part of it all is that even with all these cards, we don't have a single way to produce 2 measly mountain power for the hero expedition here. It's insane. 1 power is all we can manage with either the caregiver or the Mowgli here, so first I play the floral tent, hoping for a resupply with some sort of useful support ability, like anchoring the aloe vera or the daughter. But no, we get the stupid Jack Frost again that has just continuously gotten in my way with this deck so far. So we have no other choice but to play out the caregiver to tie this left side. Our opponent probably cannot believe their luck right now. And the round ends with a single progression for us in what could have definitely been a 2-for-0 sweep. I end up discarding the Jack Frost from reserve, of course, and at this point, I feel like I'll be cutting that card from the deck entirely after we're finished here. Now for the next round, we're starting out with a ridiculous 8 cards in hand. One of them being a new Mana Reaping, which I'm really happy to see, of course, against Muna. It's obviously very strong. With us being the starting player, we have a chance here to use Exhaust on one of our opponent's reserve cards, although with how big both of our hands are, I don't think that matters too much. Our Teija opponent goes ahead and places Daughter of Yggdrasil number 3. That's yet another neutral draw, can you believe that? But luckily for us, our opponent is still in that only water terrain over there, so the Daughter actually only provides 4 power in that regard. I try to slow play the round here, running out the caregiver, even though it's probably better to keep that in the reserve for a free anchoring effect. But this way our opponent is forced to respond to this hero expedition with the remaining 3 mana. They do that with a rare Repotter Otter. That's 4 mountain power, but the effect of allowing both players to drop something to reserve for an additional card is actually very helpful to us as well. I drop the Kodama. Muna Druid would probably have been a better idea, but oh well. Looks like our opponent is also benefiting greatly from this with a Muna Caregiver, which they can now use to anchor the Daughter of Yggdrasil. Sadly, with how weak our deck generally is in the mountain terrain, I don't think we're beating this Otter. So I opted for playing the Persephone here to make the hero expedition forest, meaning that both players will advance here. It's definitely not an ideal outcome. Our opponent is catching up, and now it's back to an even game, but what can you do? With so many cards in both players' hands, everything is really complicated, and even during the game, I didn't feel like I was finding good plays. 8 cards in hand again for the next round, and we're seeing our cheeky one-off Lyra Festival here. In the previous games I played with this deck, I normally ended up just putting this into mana, probably more than necessary, but I have to admit that I'm not really a festival player, so I have a hard time seeing the lines that get to that win during a game. But in this situation, it's kind of making me stop to think. With how our opponent has arranged for both players to be absolutely swimming in cards, I'm not able to make much use of our bonus resources from Rin's ability, and I feel like the game is sort of slipping away at this point, and I'm starting to wonder if maybe a festival win could actually be on the table here. After all, we have a Kodama in hand, which would provide the Asleep character for just 2 mana. I'm definitely keeping it in hand for now, benching the Lyra Cloth Dancer here. Our opponent starts out with the Daughter from reserve, putting some very strong power on the board. I respond with Muna Caregiver, just patiently passing back to them for now, but they do the same with Winter Outfits. That's a card you don't often see, but it serves to boost the Daughter's water power here, as well as passing back to us for just 1 mana. This is another one of these situations where there are just so many options. And I'm sure a better player would look at this and find a better move, but in the game I opted to remove the Daughter on the right side with Mana Reaping, hoping to sort of settle this round as a 1-for-1 trade. Our opponent responds with a Snoozer Shroom, which is not what I wanted to see. Now they have 1 mana open for a cheeky Beauty Sleep or something like that. Looking at this board state now, I'm kind of liking the idea of putting our unique Mowgli to the right side, paying the additional 1 to push us up to a total of 4-0. And even if one of those characters gets removed on that side or put to sleep, we still progress at least. But in the game, I pulled the trigger a bit prematurely with our Repotter Otter, which hopefully achieves kind of a similar thing, but it would probably not have been a bad idea to keep that in hand as a surprise tool for later. As things stand now with the Otter on the board, I first put 2 boosts on our characters on the right, and then I activate Otter's normal ability, dropping this Muna Druid to the reserve to anchor something in just a moment. Our opponent does the same, revealing a Mana Reaping. Obviously really scary, but not playable in this round anymore. Unfortunately now, as I expected, they do end up having the Beauty Sleep here, which does not keep us from advancing, but it wins them a progression on the right side too. So now we're going into a match point for our Teija opponent, while we're still in need of 2 more progressions, just like in game 1 against Sigismar. I like to see our opponent having to discard a whopping 3 cards from reserve here, but again, we both got a lot of free extra cards this game, so this kind of resource loss is much less impactful in this game than it would be in a normal game. As you would expect, they keep the Mana Reaping available, and for us it's just another case of just discard the Jack Frost, it's useless. Now for this upcoming final round, again I'm thinking about whether we can realistically do something with this Lyra Festival. The main problem is that with Mana Reaping available for our opponent, we would need to somehow slow play this round so hard that they go under 3 mana before we even reveal the festival. But if we manage that, everything else looks really good actually. We have 2 characters already in play, one of which we can anchor for free with the Muna Druid from reserve. We can play the Caregiver from reserve to get a fleeting character into play for just 1 mana, and then play the Kodama from hand for an asleep character for 2 mana. And then after that we still have enough left to slow play 1 more time with Floral Tent before having to commit to the festival. It looks really good. So at this point I decided to go for it because I wasn't really expecting to be able to win the game in the normal way anymore. I play out the tent, resupplying Mana Reaping. Our opponent responds with Winter Outfits. No doubt they're also trying to go as slow as possible. Muna Caregiver is next for us, which might look like it's a simple slow play to our opponent, but in reality we're setting up for a Lyra Festival. And at this point, our opponent makes use of the Mana Reaping in reserve to remove our unique Otter. That's fine, that's honestly great for us. I wasn't planning to use that anyway. Now the only thing that can stop us is another removal spell from their hand. I play out the Kodama, and our opponent's response is Floral Tent. They're not out of 1-drops to pass back to us. So mana will not be their problem. All it comes down to is whether one of their 4 cards in hand is a removal to stop this festival one way or the other. Now, they don't give us the answer to that immediately. Instead, they dig 1 more time with yet another Floral Tent, but the resupply is an Inari, which is not what they needed here. So the one-off festival dream is alive, and the game is over. We managed to pull through with some good old alternate win-con action, even though our deck only runs 1 copy of Festival. Very exciting way to end a chaotic game. GG. So there you have it, guys. 2 very close games with this Rin and Orchid deck, all about playing in the forest terrain. As you could probably tell from my commentary, I'm generally very happy with the deck as it stands, but I do have to say I'm really not impressed by the Jack Frosts. So if you have a different idea for that common slot, don't hesitate to make a switch. And as you can see from the second game, going for the occasional pivot into Lyra Festival is also very much on the table for this deck, so adding back the 2 additional copies of Festival into the main list is probably also a very reasonable idea if you like that. Although, I have to admit, I'm not immediately sure what rare I would cut for it. But that being said, I generally feel very confident to say that Rin doesn't necessarily need to play any Demeters. I mean, sure, you can try it out if you want, but don't forget it's still a 7 mana card. And as things stand, from the performance of the deck as it is now, I would say it's not needed at all. Also, I would go as far as saying that these 3 uniques I was running aren't strictly necessary either. I mean, yeah, obviously the Otter is incredibly strong, and I'm really happy to have it. You saw it used to great effect in those games, but the other 2 are more or less purely optional, and I think it's reasonable to say that a vanilla version of this deck without any uniques would also do just fine. If you end up trying out this archetype, make sure to report back in the comments about what cards you liked most. I'm on the prowl for a good replacement for Jack Frost, so I'm looking forward to hearing y'all's thoughts on the deck. Maybe he performed better for you than he did for me. But also, don't forget to check out Elio's recent Vin video that I mentioned before, which explores a bit of a different archetype for her. And with all of that being said, as usual, I hope you're all having a nice day out there, and I'll be back as soon as I can with another video. I'll see you then.